The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand. We gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise to get what we want. We got to organize.
Welcome to the Pantsula Podcast, presented from the A-APRP. We're a Pan-Africanist organization. We define Pan-Africanism as the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. And here is my comrade Jamilah, and I'm Evan. So with each episode, we always honor our ancestors because Africans, we always honor the ancestors. And for this, we're honoring Ethel Minor and Odinga.
Absolutely. Ethel Minor. If you didn't catch the little segment at the beginning, she supported the Palestinian struggle for liberation. She was part of NOI. When Malcolm X left the NOI, she left with him, and she was to be the secretary and organizer with the Organization for Afro-American Unity. When El-Haj Malik El-Shabazz was murdered, she went to SNCC and did a lot of anti-colonial work there. And she is absolutely amazing. So we definitely honor her on this day.
And as I mentioned before, we also honor Odinga, who was a Pan-Africanist chief and politician in Kenya, who was the first vice president of the independent Kenya, but was later removed from the post by Jomo Kenyatta, and for many decades fought against the neo-colonial governments of Kenyatta and Daniel Arap Moi. He was a Pan-Africanist and socialist, and also honor him for some of our ancestors that people may not know as much about or may know a little bit about, that still deserve that respect. And so for this episode, we're going to talk about international solidarity.
International solidarity. You know, I keep forgetting I have these hospital bands on. So to all the hospital workers, solidarity to all the workers there. I just wanted to say that. But international solidarity, absolutely. And we're gonna read a little bit what that means to us in that A-APRP, because we actually do have a statement in terms of what that means. And for us, as I said, we are Pan-Africanists, and what it does say here, and you can find this on the A-APRP website, it's Pan-Africanism and International Solidarity, two complementary elements of the A-APRP. And this piece, we're going to read from Why Are We Pan-Africanists? The A-APRP/AAWRU is part of the International Socialist Movement. We are socialist, anti-imperialist, and anti-Zionist. We understand that oppressed African people, like other oppressed people, are exploited as workers under international capitalism, where generally those who labor do not own and control the means that produce wealth, and those who own and control the means that produce wealth do not labor, but instead live opulently off the labor of the exploited majority. At the same time, we also understand that African people have a particular historical position within the current, dominant world social economic system of capitalism, imperialism. It was the invasion, rape, and eventual colonial occupation of Africa, along with the settler-colonial entities set up in North/South America and the Caribbean that included the wide-scale genocide of the indigenous populations, which gave rise to the system of imperialism developed in Europe. And what we're going to be talking about quite a bit today is the solidarity with the Palestinian liberation movement. And I'm sure you definitely know a lot of that is going on right now. And there's, as much as there's solidarity, with the Palestinian liberation movement, there's also resistance to it. And we're going to discuss why that resistance is problematic. And there's a lot of problematic things going on. Recently, there was, and I'm sure a lot of people know this as well, but in case you don't, there were some Republicans in Texas, and they passed a bill to prevent teachers from discussing white supremacy / critical race theory. And of course, there is a BDS movement, boycott, divest, and sanctions movement in various universities and in various states in the United States. There are actual laws, there are actual policies to prevent BDS movements, BDS solidarity from happening. And so when teachers are discouraged or forced to not discuss the history of white supremacy, particularly in the United States, that's a problem. And it's a problem when you can't talk about imperialism. It's a problem when you cannot talk about capitalism and how dangerous it is, and how inhumane it is. And there's just so much going on. Do you have anything to say in relation to that, Evan?
One thing that brings to mind is something else that happened recently. Is about the Associated Press, one of the largest capitalist media organizations. They fired someone from the AP because they posted, as Jamilah was talking about, the stuff in support of the BDS movement and against Zionism. And this came after the Israeli government blew up a building containing AP presses.
Right. Right. So the building had families in it, of course, too. But it's bad enough you have journalists in Gaza who don't have access, Gaza and the West Bank, who do not have access to electricity. So it's hard for them to have Wi-Fi. And so when they are interviewed, it's hard to hear them. But now you have, as you said, the capitalist press like AP, and you have Al Jazeera, and now their facilities, they don't have one anymore unless they find another building. But that building they worked in was detonated. So there's definitely, again, this concerted effort to prevent news about liberation struggles from happening. And this happened in when you had the movement in Azania. You had this, what's going on. People aren't even talking about what's going on in Chile, where they're actually changing the constitution.
Yeah.
So I mean, people aren't even talking about that. So it could go back to the days of Allende. We don't know, so it's possible. Hopefully,
certainly against the military, right-wing military dictatorship of Pinochet is
right.
and of course the current president Sebastian Piñera had if he was a member or he had some working relationship within the Pinochet government.
Right, yeah.
And is also a capitalist.
Yes. So people aren't even talking about, I know there's a lot of focus on what's happening in Palestine, but there's still things happening in Colombia. There's still people striking in Haiti right now. So we can't forget the international struggle, the international solidarity for liberation. We can't forget. So all of these things are connected.
Right.
And we do have a couple of pieces of music that we're going to play right now, and listen to that, take it in, and we will be right back.
There once was a land called Palestine, where Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived fine. In the 1800s, it was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. Meanwhile, a bearded guy founded Zionists for Jews to aspire, a land that becomes their home and safe only for their kind. Then there was World War I that ended when the Allies won, and England was like, hey, this beautiful land is totally mine. Still the name was Palestine, even though it was colonized, and a promise for a Zionist state was made by a man that had no right. Then more and more Jews arrived seeking refuge, and that's alright until their plan to steal the land was no longer to hide. The year was 1948 when Israel bullied its way into a state. Thousands of Palestinians fled their homes to survive. No right for return, no right for a home, no right to fight for the land that they owned. Israel expanded more and more into an apartheid. Where is your humanity? Where is your respect for dignity? Call it conflict, that's insanity. It's time to change your mind. One day Palestine will be free, so be on the right side of history. You're not anti-Semitic if you stand against war crimes. Don't be brainwashed by the news. Now you can see for yourself the truth. Learn about the story of Palestine.
First they hit with phase 1, airstrikes all day and all night. Phase 2, rockets hit the Gaza Strip with phosphorus. Phase 3, ground attack, how we gonna counteract? Boycott, divest and sanction. Boycott, divest and sanction. Boycott, divest and sanction. Israel, you should be ashamed. Killing maim thousands of civilians in our name. Claim you hitting terrorists, but children in your aim. Even murder relief workers, what's spilling from their brain while they tried to drive the ambulance. So they couldn't stand a chance. Even bomb students, hospitals, Mas Rafa and Khan Yunis. Shot them in their back like the cops to Oscar Grant. And in each case, the good old United States sponsored that. $7 million a day that we pay tax, and APAC's lobbyists is robbing us. Sometimes it feels like there ain't no stopping this, but now nobody can deny it, cause you made it too obvious. Naked truth exposed like the emperor's clothes. The struggle's getting hotter and the temperature rose. Since 1948, when you formed the state, Palestinian people still defending their homes. They ain't been surrendering, no. Boycott, divest and sanction. Boycott, divest and sanction. Boycott, divest and sanction.
The first piece was by someone, I don't have TikTok, but of course, because of the Palestinian Solidarity Networks, this is where I saw this piece of music. So it's by someone called Emmer's World .101, and it's a brief history of Palestine and of course support of the Palestinian liberation struggle. And then the second song, which you didn't hear the whole thing, but it's by an artist named Invincible, and it's called The Emperor's Clothes. And of course, it's very clear that was about BDS. And there's, what are your thoughts, Evan, around the sudden support of, I wouldn't even say BDS, because there's people like Bernie Sanders who are vehemently against BDS, but right now they're coming out and saying, well, children are being killed right now. Israel needs to slow down. What are your thoughts on folks who support the capitalist system, still support the state of Israel, and yet they're saying this needs to stop?
I think like any other moment where there's this sort of a term that you might have heard over the last years, but a reckoning where the ruling class reaches a point where even if they do support the basic tenets of something, that they know that they have to change their tactics at some point. And as we talked about the struggle in Azania, a lot of the ruling class, they profited from the National Party regime in so-called South Africa, and then at some point, and then over some time, it got to the point where they had to back off. They had to realize that the breadth of struggle against the apartheid regime in so-called South Africa got to the point where they could no longer support it openly. They had to give they had to give back some trinkets to make sure that they don't have a full blown. I mean, they don't want another. They want another Zimbabwe, basically. And I think that's kind of what's happening right now. That there is a tremendous resistance, and there's been decades, as we talk about one with Ethel Minor, the long solidarity between Africans and Palestinians that it's been building up, and not only Africans and Palestinians, but also the Irish liberation struggle, the Tamil struggle in Sri Lanka. That there have been multiple movements that worked in solidarity with Palestinians, and not to mention the indigenous nations of so-called Americas.
Yes. I want to talk about critical race theory for a second. And there's a reason I want to bring this up, because the so-called author of the definition of anti-Semitism has come out and said that right-wing Jewish people are misusing the term anti-Semitism. And so I do want to talk about critical race theory, where it's described as recognizing there is a system of inequity in regards to race. The hierarchical system of race needs to be discussed in order to, I suppose, forge a solution. Obviously, for us, if there's no class analysis, if there's no land analysis, if there is no challenge to capitalism, you're not going to solve any of this. And of course, Africa is primary to us. So if you do not solve the issues regarding Africa, you're still not going to solve any of this. So you could talk about critical race theory all day and talk about how there's racism and I mean, you can do that all day. But again,
Exactly.
Yeah, so this also goes back to the last administration, because the Trump administration, they were against training about sensitivity trainings or training about critical race theory. And so the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, like, they also were going to have a scheduled training on critical race theory, and the Trump administration said nope. So, and I do want to read this tiny piece, and this is from Capitalist News Network, CNN. So Kimberly Crenshaw, who also coined the term intersectionalism, so she was one of the folks who had a hand in critical race theory. And so it says here, but the idea behind it goes back much further to the work of civil rights activists such as W.B. Du Bois, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Pauli Murray. And why I wanted to read that is because Fannie Lou Hamer had a class analysis. It wasn't just about race for her. Like, she was just like, I don't want any part of this capitalist Democrat Party. Like, so I understand there is a class analysis that need to be had. W.B. Du Bois, he wrote books like The World in Africa because he understood that capitalism was inhumane. He understood that colonialism was something that needed to be dealt with. So to include them and narrow them down in terms of these conversations about race does a disservice to the work they did, which is why I did want to mention the critical race theory aspect of this. And I also wanted to mention this dude and what he said regarding the Trump administration. And so he was saying that that it impaired free speech to ban all of these like, he wasn't even talking about critical race theory, but he was talking about if you ban the BDS, because he straight up said he was a Zionist. I'm trying to find his name here. So he's like, I'm a Zionist, but I'm not fool enough to ban, quote, free speech. He used the words free speech. And so when I get to his name, I want to discuss the quote unquote joke, which I really don't think was a joke, that Biden did. He was in Dearborn, Michigan. And was it Dearborn, Michigan has the highest rate per capita of the Arab community in the US? Is that correct?
Yes, it's the largest proportion of its population is Arab descent, and the largest population of Lebanese of people of Lebanese descent.
So a lot of these, and I love how people talk about North Korea being state-run press, or China, or any place that is seemingly an enemy of the US or state-run. Oh, they don't let you say what you want. There's no free speech. And yet there's at least 10 people in the press, and they're like, oh, how fast can this car go? There's stuff going on in the world, but that's literally all they had to ask him. And one woman, and I'm saying woman on purpose, she asks, what are your thoughts about Israel? Or do you have anything to say before you leave on Israel? And he says, or can I ask you a question about Israel before you leave? And he says, no, you can't. Not unless you get in front of the car as I step on it. Not only is that patriarchal or misogynist, that is like the fact that Heather Heyer was run over by a white supremacist and he said something like that. The fact that this is happening in Palestine right now, where Zionists are running over Palestinians, and he makes a comment like that. Like it's just, that's clearly not a joke. Like that's clearly coming out of a white supremacist ideology. This is just Jamilah's view, but you can't tell me that was a joke. I don't know what your thoughts are, Evan, but to me, that's not a joke.
I know in a lot of these like snippets with Biden, there are a lot of these like little bits of where he gets confronted and he gets a little bit aggressive, like it's sort of like, and they talk about this with, like, you hear like so much of it with Trump. You've heard, you also heard like a fair bit with Sanders, but Biden doing the same. Oh, it's just Uncle Joe. Yeah, he just wants to care. Like why not let him have a joke? And another thing we talk about not only with Heather Heyer, but Rachel Corrie, who is a comrade who was run over by
bulldozed
by a bulldozer.
Yeah, bulldozed. Right. She was doing, like, I have done the same thing in my life, doing community defense, house defense. That's exactly what she was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, oh, you're not going to get out of our way. We're going to bulldoze you. Rachel Corrie, absolutely. They do not see Palestinians as humans. And there was Abby Martin. She went to Israel, and what was it called? Peace Square. I think it was called Peace Square. So she interviewed people, and they straight up were like, we don't see Arabs as people. They just need to be exterminated. I mean, this is what people are saying. So it's it's just the amount of inhumanity that, thank you. Have a good night. The amount of inhumanity that was my cousin. The amount of inhumanity that exists for people to say, we're trying to fight for our rights and self-determination, but you can't see someone else's humanity. Like, I'm definitely not surprised. That's how people were conditioned. This is the second you get into schools, the second you're born, you're taught this by your families, you're taught this by the schools, you're taught this as an adult. So, and then there's a lot of Jewish solidarity activists and organizers as well, And so not only in Israel are they learning these things, they're learning them in the US as well. And I'm sure definitely in other places where
Mhm.
Zionism is highly supported. And the person I was talking about was Kenneth Stern. And so he wrote an article, it was in The Guardian. So he wrote an article called I Drafted the Definition of Anti-Semitism. Right-wing Jews are weaponizing it. And why I even think him talking about drafting a definition of anti-Semitism, and this is the next thing I want to get into. There's a lot of things to get into with this, but
Mhm.
after I talk about what he wrote, I want to get into the definition of Semitism, because how can you draft a definition of Semitism when Semitism is way older than you? And so I'm like, it's like, how can you draft it? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. So he writes, it was never intended to be a campus hate speech code, but that's what Donald Trump's executive order accomplished this week. And so I think it's more of an anti-Trump thing than a, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people, because Trump said the things a lot of people wanted to say out loud, and so they have to distance themselves from it. And so now it's like, oh, because this dude straight up says in the piece that he's a Zionist. So if you're acknowledging that you're a Zionist, that means you have supported by proxy racism and white supremacy. So now Trump said the bit out loud, and now everyone's just like, oh. So he says, yeah, it was never intended to be a campus hate speech
Yeah.
code, but that's what Donald Trump's executive order accomplished this week. This order is an attack on academic freedom and free speech, and will harm not only pro-Palestinian advocates, but also Jewish students and faculty and the academy itself. The problem isn't that the executive order affords protection to Jewish students under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. The Department of Education made clear in 2010 that Jews, Sikhs, and Muslims as ethnicities, even though those are religions, but whatever, could complain about intimidation, harassment, and discrimination under this provision. I supported this clarification and filed a successful complaint for Jewish high school students when they were bullied, even kicked. There was a Kick a Jew Day. Like, I definitely don't support that. But starting in 2010, right-wing Jewish groups took the working definition, which had some examples about Israel, such as holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of Israel and denying Jews the rights to self-determination, and decided to weaponize it with Title VI cases. While some allegations were about acts, mostly they complained about speakers, assigned texts, and protests they said violated the definition. All these cases lost. So then these same groups asked the University of California to adopt the definition and apply it to its campuses. When that failed, they asked Congress, and when those efforts stalled, the president. And going back to Abby Martin, she actually was to speak at a school, I think it was in Texas, and she forged a lawsuit because of this, because of the anti boycott, divestment, and sanction policies at that university. So she ended up suing either the state or the university. So as I mentioned, there are policies that are enacted which prevent any sort of protest against Zionism and in favor of boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And so I want to get into, before we get into this, again, this is all connected, because I want to talk about this anthology that Colin Kaepernick is behind, and how this is connected to the Panthers as well as SNCC's solidarity with oppressed peoples around the world. So the whole thing about anti-Semitism, like, to apply it to one group of people, and it tends to be people, like, I can't go into people's bloodlines. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I am not a eugenicist or anything. It is funny to me how you have Christian Zionists discussing anti-Semitism and saying people are anti-Semites, being anti-Semitic, but you also have European Jews who are saying that. Like, I do not see, say, Mizrahi Jews, I do not see Sephardic Jews, I do not see Ethiopian Jews coming out like as part of the ADL, as part of A-APRP. Like, I'm just not seeing this. And so there's definitely with Zionism a racial component to that. And to not include Palestinians in this, you are being anti-Semitic, like that, like Palestinians are Semitic peoples. So I really want to get into, before people go, what are you talking about? There's an actual definition of Semitism. And a lot of people have said, well, that's the old definition. Like that, it doesn't change. Like languages are Semitic languages, are they not? Arabic, Amharic, I'm pronouncing it wrong, Amharic, Hebrew, those are Semitic languages. So like, what are your thoughts on that, Evan? Because I'm
with you on that, and also one thing is that even if you do apply the anti-Semitism, focus just on people who are culturally and religiously Jewish, that even in that case, that there is, especially now, if you like all hear from Zionists, that they'll say that if you say you're anti-Zionist, oh, you're anti-Semitic, yeah, anti-Semitic, but wait, if I'm against Zionism because it's a settler colonial ideology. It's like it's in place, like the indigenous population there. It's and also it's even though there are like some like labor Zionists, but even then, like it's like, well, that's top for another day. But for the most part, there's like a bourgeois quality to it as well. And there's been a history of Jews who oppose Zionism because they think it's not in the interest of working of the mass of the dispossessed people, and it automatically equate anti-Zionism to that, when there's definitely a long history of anti-Jewish sentiment and anti-Jewish action. It's a trick, basically.
And I think if I think a lot of the Christian Zionists in particular, or again, I'm going to have another Biden quote, because to me, like if you want to talk about if you want to talk about being pro-Zionist and anti-Semitic, I think a lot of pro-Zionists are anti-Semitic. And here's an example. This is from Joe Biden. Israel is essential to the security of Jews worldwide. Like there's to me, a high racial component to that. It's not talking about, again, Beta Israel or the Ethiopians. I know there's actually I don't know what the percentage is, but there's folks who are from Morocco, who are from Yemen, who are from Egypt. And so I don't know if that community and they're Arabs, but are they included in that community? They are, Israeli citizens, but they're Arabs. So like, do they count? And are they even Jewish? I know that if you are Palestinian, you need an ID wherever you are. So if you're in the West Bank, if you're in East Jerusalem, if you are a citizen of Israel, quote unquote citizen, wherever you are, you need an ID. That determines your status. So if you're for instance, wanting to move, if you're in the West Bank and you say, oh, I want to move to East Jerusalem, it's going to be hard for you to do. But if you're in East Jerusalem, it's okay for you to move to the West Bank or Gaza, because that's moving downward. So that's definitely has to do with class, because again, like and this has happened, you ask the quote unquote average person in Israel, and again, this is how people are trained. This is ideological struggle here. So they're saying, oh, we just need to move in. It's like, what's that video where the guy Yakub from Brooklyn or whatever, he says, well, someone else is going to steal it, so I might as well steal it. So that is the common narrative that you're seeing when people like Abby Martin interview the quote average person in Israel. And so I actually look at what's happening in Israel too. We're going to be jumping around a little bit, but I'm looking at Palestinians in a similar light as Puerto Ricans, because Puerto Rico is an extension of the US, but they can't vote in elections. It's the same thing. Palestinians are living in an extension of Israel, but cannot vote. And so this is why I think these solidarity movements need to happen. What happened in the building where families were living, and they're saying, well, Hamas, like we think Hamas, it's like, are you kidding me? Hamas is the government. They were elected at some point. You need to respect that. Whether or not you agree with that, they are an elected government. You can't just go and attack people just because you don't agree with the government. But of course, there's a reason why they're being attacked. They're using Hamas. Again, whether or not people agree with Hamas, that's not the issue. They were an elected government. If people want to talk about democracy, and Israel's talking about, oh, we're a democracy, we're the biggest democracy of the Middle East. Respect other people's elected governments. Like, that's the whole point. Like Venezuela, same thing. Like, how can you say Juan Guaido is the president when he wasn't elected? Like, that makes no sense. Maduro was the elected president. So respect people's governments. You know, Palestinians having to carry IDs. You know, how as a U.S. president, how can Kamala Harris be like, oh yeah, Israel's, you know, they all are in support of this illegal, racist, white supremacist, settler colonial state. And they will continue to be. And this administration has just been like, oh, you know, whatever, we're not going to say that much. And like, oh, you need to chill, but not really saying that much, still like sliding over dollars to fund the military. And so there's no freedom of movement. Like, yes, in Gaza, the IDF is not there, but they're controlling the border. So you literally can't go anywhere. In East Jerusalem, Palestinians can't vote. Like, why is the US government declaring Jerusalem as an Israeli like, that makes no sense. Why is the US making those decisions? Right. Why? That doesn't make any sense. A lot of people were talking about, oh, treason, whatever. Like, wouldn't that traditionally be treason because you're more invested in another government? Like, I don't know. I didn't do very well at civics. I don't but you know, so and then of course, you know, just last week, we had the Nakba 73 years ago, and Palestinians had to flee because it was like, oh, we're Israel now, we're going to plant our flag. So people needed to flee. So they either moved to, quote, Israel proper, or they moved to other places, which is now the diaspora. And so, of course, you know, they straight up said it. It's like, we need at least 60% of Jews to populate Palestine in order to have a Jewish homeland. So this is like in their policy. So this is like, y'all can look this up. Y'all don't have to believe us. But again, like, you have to get a permit of permanent residency, which can be taken away at any time. Like, if you're Palestinian, they also use the absentee property law in order to seize the land, in order to do what they want and build settlements, because it's like, well, y'all not coming back, y'all flee the land. How is this not apartheid? How is this not an apartheid state? How is demolishing houses of families and forcing them to move to ghettos or shanty towns? Going back to Azania, how is this not? And cutting people off from electricity, and talking about Wi-Fi or clean water. How is this not apartheid? How this is against international law, and yet the US continues to fund this project called Israel. Like, I just like, and so if anybody says, oh, it's an apartheid, oh, they're being anti-Semitic. It doesn't make any sense. So getting back to Semitism, this is actually from classroom.synonym.com. So, this is what they're teaching in classrooms, I guess. So it's talking about being rooted in biblical history. It says, according to the Genesis account, Noah and his family survived the global flood by living in an ark. Semites can trace their heritage back to Shem, one of Noah's sons. In ancient history, the term Semite included Arabs, Assyrians, the Akkadians of Babylonia, the Canaanites, Aramaean tribes, certain groups in Ethiopia, and the Hebrew tribes. So how is it that only Jewish people are Semites? And if you are in any sort of Palestinian solidarity network, you're being anti-Semitic. That doesn't make sense, because Arabic is one of the various Semitic languages. So I just,
Right.
somebody tell me something. So I just need to know.
Yeah.
So Evan, tell me something.
And yeah, it's if someone says something negative about, say, Eritrea, is that anti-Semitic?
And not to mention the fact that, like, Ethiopians, Beta Israel, how they're treated. It's on video where, someone's shopping in a store and they're saying, go back home, and they're being called names. So someone in Israel, are they being anti-Semitic to someone else who's Jewish? I mean, what exactly does that mean when people are saying anti-Semitic? I mean, again, it has a class element to it, and it definitely has a racial element to it. It's like people using the term woke in a way that's divisive. That also has a racial connotation to it when they're doing that. People, wokeness. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But people need to ask themselves, anyone who's used the term, you're being anti-Semitic, ask yourself what you mean when you say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and exactly. And personally, when there is actions that are taken against people who are Jewish, and I use anti-Jewish because simple, like right there, they're attacking this person or discriminating or exploiting them because of their Jewishness. Because if it's about anti-Semitism, then it gets into a very I say want to say debate worthy, or maybe not debate worthy, but certainly it has its flexibility, especially in certain contexts. And again, we're not saying that. Again, that we're anti-Zionist. We're not saying we're not anti-Jewish.
Not at all. Like that. That makes no sense. Like, there's literally organizations, Jews for Peace. Like, there's so many organizations of people of Jewish descent who are anti-Zionists, who are critiquing the government of Israel. There is actually a current movement of Israeli citizens right now that are saying defect from the IDF. Are they being anti-Semitic? I have personally known Israeli citizens who protested products from settlements. Are they being anti-Semitic, or are they being a bad Jew or whatever? Like, I remember that dude Alan Combs. Like, he ended up moving to Fox and did Hannity and Combs, and then yeah, but he had a show. It was a syndicated show. It was like the Alan Combs show or something. And so he actually would critique the policies of the Israeli government. Call after call after call. You're a bad Jew. You're a bad Jew. Like, and so he said, what? I can't critique the Israeli government? Like, I'm a taxpayer. My taxes. So that's what he would do. Like, when he moved to Fox, I don't know if his views changed on that. But there are plenty of people who either traditionally practice Judaism or in terms of genetic lineage are Jewish, and they critique the Israeli government and or are anti-Zionist. So what does that make them anti-Semitic? That it doesn't make sense. Zionism is not Judaism. They are not one and the same. They are mutually exclusive. You know, anyone who pays taxes in the US needs to critique what's happening. Your tax dollars are going $38 billion going over a span of 10 years. Are you kidding me? And that was under the Obama administration. And people are okay with that just because, oh, I don't want to be no. So that doesn't make sense to me.
Another point, actually 2 points. One is how much a lot of the biggest supporters of the Zionist movement are really anti-Jewish as all get out. Like we talk about the Christian Zionists, they want Jews to go there to be redeemed. Then when they die, they're redeemed.
Yes.
And we accept Jesus Christ as the Lord. That is blanket anti-Jewish.
To me, that is one of the highest forms, if you want to say anti-Semitism. It's literally saying, I don't respect you as a Jewish person because you don't believe in Jesus. And so we want you to go over there. And to me, it's similar to the Southern strategy in a funny way, where it's like, oh, we just want y'all Negroes to go over here. So we want y'all Jews to go over there. But it's even a bigger process because now you're dealing with the religions. And, you know, people like David Duke, you know, who claim to be in support of the Palestinian liberation struggle, which is a total lie. But he did it because he's anti-Semitic. Right. So he's just like, I don't support the state of Israel, but that's not because he supports Palestinians, it's because he's anti-Semitic. Like they just kind of skip over him and then they're like, okay, Farrakhan or okay, anyone who supports BDS. Like when David Duke over here, you know, and Trump is over here and all these other white supremacists are over there attacking Jewish people. I'm like,
yeah, and if you've seen any footage, that a lot that not only are they attacking Palestinians, they're also attacking any Jewish person that is either critical or like a left wing. So it's like a right wing authoritarian movement. So and also one other thing we want to touch about as solidarity is the idea that when Africans anywhere are supporting the resistance to Zionism, they say, "Oh, it's just Jews and Arabs. They like talk, like, getting each other. Like, why does it affect Africans or what?" But the thing is, if you're African in the diaspora, especially if you're in Africa in the snakes, a lot of the police forces like the police forces here in the snakes and the police forces and IDF, they exchange strategies, they exchange tactics, they exchange, I think they even exchange like weaponry. So, and a lot of the neo-colonial forces, like we talked about Colombia, that they also get training with Israeli defense.
Yes.
And Colombia has one of the largest African populations here in the so-called Americas.
Yes. And the NYPD, most notably, I mean, there are many police forces in the snakes that have traveled to Israel to train with the IDF, but the NYPD notably has done it, and also Derek Chauvin. And the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd is coming up. Mm-hmm. And Derek Chauvin was also had this training. So the movement of the knee on the neck, that is an IDF tactic that they use on Palestinians all the time. And as you mentioned, Evan, this is a huge reason why there should be solidarity. The other notion of solidarity, and then I'm going to get to some quotes and then I'm going to talk about this Kaepernick issue, and then getting back to solidarity. We talked about Ethel Minor, so there was that solidarity there with SNCC. The NOI also had solidarity with the Palestinian liberation struggle. If you look, there are people in Palestine that have Black Lives Matter signs, and most notably, when you had protests going on in Ferguson,
Right.
there was communication on how to deal with police terror, because the same weapons that are used on Africans are used on Palestinians. And so this is how you deal with it. So to say there is no solidarity literally makes no sense. Solidarity has been happening for decades between Africans and Palestinians. And those are just some examples.
Right.
So, and here's some more Zionist quotes. This is from Mike Pompeo, and talking about the Trump administration's support of settlement expansion. He says is not per se inconsistent with international law, which would be absolute lie, because international law does not support apartheid. And so this is from top cop Kamala Harris. Quote, I believe that when any organization delegitimizes Israel, we must stand up and speak out for Israel to be treated equally. And this is from Netanyahu. First, before I go to Netanyahu, this is from Linda Thomas Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador to the UN in the current administration. She says, I look forward to standing with Israel. This is at her confirmation hearing. Standing against the unfair targeting of Israel, the relentless resolutions that are proposed against Israel unfairly, ... Israel has no closer friend than the United States. And then we're going to get to Netanyahu. So he talks about, and this is on social media, by the way, he says, Israel is not a state of all its citizens. It is the nation state of the Jewish people. So they're straight up telling you what it is. Palestinians need IDs. Yes, if you're a Palestinian citizen of Israel, you have a bit more means to move around, but you still have to have an ID to make sure you don't live in the West Bank. I mean, like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You know, people talking about free speech here, now getting to Colin Kaepernick. So he decides to put his name to an anthology. It's an anthology. I don't think he wrote anything in it. Maybe he wrote a preface or something, but he put his name to an anthology of art, etc., which is advocating for the abolition of the police system. And on the cover is an image by Emory Douglas. It's a drawing by Emory Douglas of a young person, and as a young girl holding the Black Panther paper. And I mean, you're on social, like I'm hardly on, like I use YouTube or whatever, but I'm not on like the other forms of social media. So I'm sure you've seen some of this more than I can discuss. But what I have seen is particularly African women, and this makes me very sad, because the Panthers did do international solidarity. I mean, you know, they supported Maoism. It's what, you know, it's like, okay.
Yeah.
So, so to see African women complain of this image on the cover, which was by Emory Douglas, and saying, we don't need someone who's dark skinned with 4C hair, and we're always on the front lines. Like, y'all dudes need to put y'all women or light skinned women, whatever, and, you know, like the women that you protect on there. The reality is, if you are organizing, you know the reality of women and non-men, trans folks, and other marginalized genders tend to be on the front lines of the struggle. That is the reality. So why not put that reality on the cover of this anthology?
Right.
And also, it's an image talking about the Panthers. Context is important. And what is wrong with women being on the front lines of the struggle? Like, yes, we all need to, regardless of gender, like we all need to be on the front lines of the struggle together, but that's not the reality. Patriarchy exists, and women do a ton of the work. Non-men do a ton of the work. Marginalized genders do a ton of the work. And so this is reflected on the cover of this anthology, and people were complaining about it. And people were also saying, well, we are the marginalized gender, we're the least protected. And so they're echoing El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, but yet not respecting his legacy. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, women are the least protected, blah, blah, blah. And these are women that I've heard saying this. So I haven't heard a lot of men saying this, but we're like, well, we are the least protected. And, you know, like y'all are saying we need to abolish cops, but we need them. And it's like, as a person who has done community defense, I'm like, no, you don't need cops. And also, if you look at the Deacons of Defense, if you look at the Panthers, if you look at any organized community that was like, you didn't see cops there. So it is possible, and it is a reality, and it is historical fact that you do not need cops when the community is organized. People speaking against this anthology, it's clear they're not organized. So I'm going to shut up and listen to your thoughts on that.
Between stuff for finals, but I've been fortunate that I didn't see as much of this. I know you shared a YouTube video about this, but I've been fortunate that I didn't see much of the backlash of the cover. Thank goodness, because that's just another, it's like a void. And it just really says a lot about not only about the likely class character of the people who are speaking about these I honestly think that it just say the need for the pigs, for the police, this need for like all the men have to protect us. The men, like it has a lot of petty bourgeois thing to it that I need to make sure that I get mine. I want to make sure that if something inhibits me from reaching my success, whatever, like this individual success, that I need the status quo to help me. I want to make sure that I'm safe enough to get in the the boardroom or the top here in academia or some social influence, something that, and it does, like, I don't know, it just baffles me. And another thing we were discussing beforehand is that a lot of the literature, a lot of the on the ground work, as you're saying, a lot of that is from like African women. So don't, and it's sort of like an assumption that, I don't know anyone who believes this. It doesn't mean no one believes it. It just means your group doesn't believe it.
Exactly. The question I ask people is, when there's a complaint about an issue or someone's going on and on about an issue, are you in an organization? Crickets. So it's like, well, don't just complain about the problem. Do something about it. Join an organization. I mean, we can't say that enough. It's not enough to just complain about a problem. And that is what I'm seeing. The same thing that also seeing when men are murdered by the state. I'm seeing the same exact complaints. Like, well, men don't protect us, so I'm not going to be out in the streets protesting his death. It's just like, if we were organized, we could struggle with that, brother, if they are displaying issues of patriarchy, and we give people a chance to grow. But if we're just like, well, I'm going to write him off, he didn't protect me, and making a gross generalization about men, then, we're not going to resolve anything. You can't say, oh, Malcolm X was great over here, but like men are trash. It's just, I understand that I understand why there is an issue with men, but we have to understand it's also a system which men benefit from, and we have to resolve this issue. So to just be like, well, he was murdered by the state, like, we understand the state is the problem. And so if we don't struggle with each other, it's And we're just like the whole people have a problem with cancel culture, and yet they cancel people. Like I don't
Yes.
understand this. So yeah, there's definitely a class aspect to this. Separating when someone says something like that, it's a separation from the masses. It's just I wanted to address this, and getting back to the international solidarity, like sort of getting back to the Panthers and everything.
Yeah.
Even in our community solidarity, like we need to have solidarities with our community, but we need to understand that it's a larger framework. Not only are US dollars going to install coups to destabilize democratically elected governments, we should be concerned about that. Tax dollars are going to financially support a military to bulldoze houses and put families in ghettos without electricity or clean water. Why would you not be concerned about that? Why would you not take issue with that? Why would you not have solidarity with the people who were experiencing that? Because the same thing happened in Philly with move May 13th, 1985. Families were told to get out of the neighborhood 24 hours before they bombed the Move family, the Move organization. How can you not see the connections? How can you people talk about Black Wall Street all the time? Oh, they got bombed from the sky. It's just like people don't want to talk about what happened in Wilmington, North Carolina. It was like 1897.
Yeah, exactly. It's a coup. It was a coup.
It was a coup. And this was in the US. How can people not make that connection between what happens here and what happens in Palestine? And I refuse to call it Israel. No, is a legal settler colonial. I mean, as is the US, but that's a whole other episode. But how can you not take issue with what is going on with tax dollars? Like people are like, oh, I'm a taxpayer, this and that. But yeah, you don't take issue with your dollars going to destabilize Venezuela. You don't take issue with your tax dollars going to murder families in Palestine. You don't take issue with economic embargoes with Cuba. Like I don't see how anyone doesn't take issue with that.
All right. And another thing right now, the continued struggle of West Papua. The U.S. is supporting the Indonesian military, and as well as and going back, like the so-called pullout from Afghanistan, they're going to keep supporting the government. They're going to keep private militias there. So these people in Afghanistan, these people in West Papua, these people in Zimbabwe, oh, I can't believe they took $3 away. Yeah, and they're using that money to look someone who looks like me, who looks like Jamilah, who looks like all our comrades on this podcast, who might speak Spanish, they might speak Swahili, they might speak some other language that we're not worthy of having self-determination. That does that not, and if you're out there calling for for reform police, because they're getting trained by the same people that they're supporting over there. So you have to look outside this country.
This country has over 800 military bases around the world. AFRICOM exists. You need to be concerned, and you need to really study the history of that, and you need to organize. And we're going to keep saying that every week. Like, you could be tired of it, but the truth is going to come around. Like, somebody else is going to tell you that. So, I mean,
yeah.
So I do want to address, sort of getting to this conversation as well. There are people who are deemed artists who support human rights. These contradictions that exist. Artists like Stevie Wonder. So 2012, he was to perform for a concert benefiting the Friends of the IDF. Everybody got on him. There were activists in Israel who protested the settlements, other folks, Jewish diaspora folks. Of course, the usual suspects were like, Stevie Wonder, what are you doing? Like, you understood what happened in Azania, aka South Africa. You went to jail for protesting apartheid. Don't you understand apartheid's happening in Palestine right now? Israel. I'm gonna see, like, just, I'm calling it Palestine because that's just what it's, Palestine. And the other thing I see,
and look how closely they work together.
Huh?
And think about how closely Israel. Think about how close so-called Israel and so-called South Africa worked together especially during the apartheid year.
Yes. So people
Like
were
the nuclear
program
that it had.
Yes. And so there was a BDS when it came to that issue, but somehow people don't see the connection. And so Stevie Wonder was awarded what's called the Wolf Prize. And so it's apparently coveted. And so, of course, there's another protest. Stevie Wonder, don't accept. I don't think he's going anywhere because it's, a pandemic or whatever. Some people think it's not. It still is. But, so people are signing petitions. Please do not accept this award. I don't know if Stevie Wonder responded to it, but then you have popular figures, and since everything is political, it's not just entertainment. So you have what's the woman who played Wonder Woman, who was an IDF soldier and is a Zionist?
Gal Gadot.
Yes. So of course she plays the both sides, like all lives matter thing, but of course she was trying to play off, but she's in support of Israel. Stevie Wonder is not principled if he's going to continue taking these awards from the settler colonial state of Israel when he's all like, free South Africa. Like, be principled, stand on your square. So I think it's really important. Don't be pressured by these organizations. Like, if you can't make a connection why what's happening in Palestinians, you're not taking a principled stance. To not be concerned that the US government either like forces embargoes, creates coups, installs coups, like, to not be concerned about that and have international solidarity is very, very problematic. I wanted to also quickly mention there is, speaking of, and this is why, again, Judaism and Zionism are not one and the same. So there's actually a gang of Jewish employees at Google, and they signed a petition to call for the CEO of Google to make a statement in terms of Palestinian solidarity. So to say that, like, that, oh, there's an agenda, no, like, there are people who either traditionally practice Judaism, as I said earlier, or are culturally Jewish or are ethnically Jewish, who actually are part of this international solidarity in terms of what's happening with Palestinians. So you can't paint everyone with a broad brush. That makes no sense. I wanted to ask you, moving on, this connection to the connection people make between Garveyism and Zionism. So in the book Garvey and Garveyism, which Amy Jacques Garvey wrote, so this connection was made as well. And then there's the book that's called Geographies of Liberation, the Making of an Afro-Arab Political Imaginary. This connection was made again. So why do you think that people make this connection between Zionism and Garveyism? And these books, obviously, they've been written a bit in depth about it, but let's talk about it a bit.
Sure. And I think one as we mentioned, the Geographies of Liberation, there's a section on page 83 says, given that Bunch would become an integral figure in international deliberations concerning the fate of Palestine, it's interesting that he linked the Garvey movement to Zionism they were both as impractical. According to Bunch, for the American Negro, the Garvey program may be characterized as a black counterpart of the Zionist movement. Like Zionism, argued Bunch, Garveyism offered followers an emotional escape from oppression, and like Zionism was impractical. For attractive land for such ventures no longer available due to consuming greed and the inexorable demands of imperialist nations. And while serving on the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, Bunch would hear similar positions articulated by Palestinian communists who argued that Zionism was a form of European colonialism. I have some. I think in some ways there is some connection, especially as far as to the. Even though there are like Garveyites who are critical of capitalism, as well as some Zionists who are critical of capitalism, that there does a play up of the racial aspect. However, at the same time, but the one thing about the Garveyism movement that made it so like infallible to certain parts of the ruling class is that a large part of the membership of the UNIA, there were working class people. and when they did attempt to get land in Liberia, so for some Africans to go there, the Liberia was like, it's like, you see, you know that agreement we made, Marcus, and then he reaches behind him for the big wad of cash. It's like, let's see, sorry, we can't do that. Because Firestone, you know.
Yeah. There's definitely the aspect of land, because Africans having self-determination and sort of the land back movement of the UNIA and other organizations and political parties. So are you saying that there's more of a, in terms of the comparisons to Zionism, are you saying, like, is it a combination of land and race, or was it primarily race that the comparison existed in?
I think it's an issue of land and race. I think another aspect that I think that could draw parallels between the two is that I think there's an idea of, okay, Africans here in the United States, Africans elsewhere, where the white basically does don't bother trying to overthrow them, don't bother trying to start a revolution, like getting the land back. They just fall. Like one thing I even though I did I did research on Garvey and Garveyism, as far as I know, I'm not sure to what extent there is a discussion of the land for indigenous nations here in Turtle Island. And I think another aspect where there is some parallel is the way that there's an idea that not only don't bother to have some revolution against the capitalist state you're in, or somehow do something radical, that there is the idea of, okay, they have the power, so let them have it. Let's all go back, or at least those who want to go back, we can go back and build our power, because it's no use to either try to convince them or try to overthrow them. And I think in both cases, I think that's where the similarity is. And even though some of the tactics, especially in regards to some stuff the early W.E.B. Du Bois, some of the stuff written about Marcus was it was extra. That a lot of it was a bit overwrought. That I do think there is a similarity in which they think that almost it's almost a bit of a not necessarily we can't bother with solidarity with hitting this, so might as well go back and fill our power, and then we can work together. But yeah, but there are some differences where I think there is a bit more of a push against the imperialist European imperialist nation aspect of for Garism rather than Zionism.
So if you look at, say, the US or whatever, there's North America, just a continent.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the countries. So you have Mexico, the snakes, and Canada. And then you have states within those countries.
Mm-hmm.
And so Palestine would be the country. I don't care what anybody says. And then Israel's an illegal state. And so now they're calling Palestine a state. I'm like, no, Palestine's the country. And then you have the state that calls itself a state that wants to be a nation state that stole land. So I think, that maybe if people think about it in that way, because people are like, oh, 2-state solution. I'm like, no, give the land back and it'll be Palestine again. And then even people talking about having a 2-state solution, if Netanyahu is straight up saying this is we want this to be a nation state situation, which is for the Jews, and Palestinians have to have IDs to so the security can recognize where they're living. How can you have a 2-state solution? So anyone be like, well, we need a 2-state solution, you have to look at the realities that Palestinians are living in before you can even advocate for a 2-state solution. Because the prime minister is straight up saying, no, this we want this land to be totally for Jews. So to advocate for it, just that doesn't make sense to me, because even if people are saying that, that's not the reality. And that's not the objective that Israel wants. So anyone being like, we need a 2-state solution, what would your suggestion be? Because it's just, again, not the reality.
Yeah.
So.
and I think you look at a couple other issues, like a couple other places where you say, we need a 2-state. Look how well we're, for example, Ireland. You have Ireland and then occupied 6 counties, and they say, oh, they had the troubles, like Tony Blair, Tony Blair, Clinton, they did good, Good Friday agreement, and then Brexit happens, and I was like, oh no, what do we do? And of course, really awful cases, the Indian subcontinent and the partition of India, and you see the results of it ever since then. Obviously during the partition of the mass migrations and murders and killings, as well as the occupation of Kashmir, and you have, and I think another part is the cooperation between the right-wing government in India and the right-wing government in Israel. So they're both doing occupation. If you talk about how militarized Palestine is and so-called Israel, think about Kashmir, the place that's supposedly Indian.
Oh, I could do a whole episode on the Modi government, but yeah, I won't even get there. Yeah. Ooh. Oh, then you got the episode of, let's see, good Modi would be under there. I know people are like fascist Trump, but it's just like Trump is he's just the tool. we gotta get to who's actually, who's beneath Trump. But
we got a lot of oil. Well,
exactly, oil is beneath Trump. And then even it's funny because you had at one point in Saudi Arabia, who is obviously, I'm sure most people know that Saudi Arabia is an ally of the US. But at one point, there was like you had the king who was like what was the king's name? I'm forgetting, but he was pro-Palestinian. He was sort of like quote unquote socialist leaning. Didn't
Found was the king found?
Yes. So
Okay.
but because of sort of the pan-Arab organization and community, he was definitely not into Gaddafi, because Gaddafi ended up sort of being a pan-Africanist. And if you read the Green Book, he's like, yo, Arabs, you need to like chill. I think anyone before anyone has any sort of views on Gaddafi, read the Green Book. And then I think it's sort of like reading the Red Book, reading the Green Book. But yeah, Gaddafi was just like, yo, we need to pay respects to the indigenous folks of Libya, and amongst other things. And the pan-Arab community was like, ah! And I feel like the king was just like, I don't like Gaddafi. But on the other end, he was driving to nationalize resources. It was just like, you want to have equality between gender. So all this other stuff was going on. And of course, he was murdered. So now you have, Saudi Arabia, which has oil and resources. And Saudi Arabia is now being like, Israel needs to chill. And I'm like, huh, really? Like, y'all are a supporter of what's going on, and now y'all are like, Israel needs to chill. I'm like, what's up your sleeve, So I find that interesting, as well as that the forces that supported this Israeli apartheid's now being like, you need to chill. And there's something going on, and I don't like, people are attributing it to, well, this is so out in the open, but it's always been out in the open. It's been out in the open since 1947. Yes, I know that, there's more access to the internet, more people are organizing. Maybe people are still mad at Trump. I don't know. But it is interesting that more and more people are in support of the Palestinian struggle. And because this ceasefire, which I don't think is going to last, Netanyahu was like, I don't think so. It's not, So, but the ceasefire that is happening, are people going to be like, whatever, what's going on over here? Look at the football game. I don't know. Hopefully people continue to organize and keep up any sort of news about this. And again, like, people also need to understand there's things going on in other parts of the world that need attention as well. So we can do a lot of things at once.
And
like,
all this stuff's connected.
We can do it, and it's connected.
Like, the ruling class is connected.
Exactly. So again, the U.S. has over 800 military facilities around the world. And with Afghanistan, people are like, yeah, U.S. is getting out of Afghanistan. It's like, no, the private contractors are not. So really don't believe what the capitalist media says. Like, there's still going to be private interest in this because there's still resources. And so it's the same thing with Israel. Like, Biden could be like chill on this end, on this hand, but he's throwing money at Israel still. So, or I guess I should say the administration. He's not single-handedly doing it. So it's important to not wholeheartedly believe capitalist news network, or I don't have a acronym for MSNBC, but all of these networks, Fox, whatever, like The Guardian even, or AP, it's like, don't just simply believe what they say. And with somebody's riding a motorcycle out there. When even talking about the vaccines, or talking about opening things back up, you had to have a class analysis with that. It's just like, well, we're gonna cease unemployment because now we need you slaves to go back. So
right.
Don't be so happy we're opening stuff back up. The people who actually own the means of production are losing their profit margins, so they need the workers to go back out and produce labor in order to profit again. So this whole thing about, yay, we're opening back up. And no, be really careful with that. It's still a pandemic. You know, even with the vaccine, are you going to have, and so I think even if they're going to be like, okay, you need these vaccine passports, do you not think that's going to be racialized? Do you not think that's going to be similar to what's happening in Palestine? Do you not think that certain areas and certain communities are going to be targeted to present documentation? Think about this. So it's important to understand what's going on globally.
They think how much wealth the ruling of the owners of media production. Think how much wealth they got from the shutdown and the COVID. Like they got trillions from us, and you honestly think that everything's gonna go back to normal? And like normal was kind of crappy anyway, but still, you think it's gonna go back to normal like on its own? No.
No. I wanted to sort of round this out. Recently had El Haj Malik, El Shabazz, Omawale, Malcolm X recently celebrated his born day. It would be very interesting if he were still here. He would have had a field day with all of this. But I want to.
Boy.
He wrote a piece. He actually went to Gaza, and after his visit to Gaza, he actually did write a piece, and it was about Zionism. As a person in the NOI, he also, he already understood the Palestine situation to some degree. Actually going to Gaza and having an analysis and it's sort of shifting, and I wouldn't even say in a different direction. It flourished where he had more of a class analysis. He had more of an international solidarity perspective. And so I think it's, I would say not shifted, because a lot of particularly racists like to say his analysis shifted, and it didn't.
It broadened.
Yes. So I do want to talk a little bit about that. Before I get into that.
And speaking of.
Oh yeah, go on.
Yes, and speaking of, as we talk about international solidarity and Al Shabazz, Omale, Malcolm X, his birthday is like another bit is who else had birthdays on that day? Not only him, but also Ho Chi Minh, Yuriko Chiyama, Lorraine Hansberry, and Jose Marti, all May 19th. And not like that, like Ho Chi Minh, like some of his early awakening came from being in Harlem and visiting UNIA meetings. And of course, Malcolm X, his parents were Garveyites, and he had a Garveyist perspective, and also when he was working internationally, he saw many other Pan-Africanist leaders, and like Kwame Nkrumah, like Ture, and so on and so forth. And one of the closest close person, not only as far as work, but also like when he was murdered and assassinated, was Yuriko Chiyama. She was right there, and her work was involved a lot of work with the revolutionary nationalists of Africans too. And of course, Lorraine Hansberry, even though as a playwright, had a socialist point of view and wrote too. And of course, Jose Marti is against Spanish imperialism in Cuba.
Yes, and that's the thing about Lorraine Hansberry. Lorraine Hansberry actually inspired me, because people go, "Oh, are you a writer?" And I would always go, "No," but she was the one person. Just listening to her talking about being a writer, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm a writer." Like, it just serves its purpose, and obviously that's one of the things they don't talk about, her being a socialist and being an anti-capitalist. And so just that even inspired me even more and be like, yes, I'm a writer. What I do serves a purpose, and what we all do serves a purpose. We just have to find that purpose, tap into it. And I think that's the same thing about organizing, because, you know, you're doing this day-to-day work and it's not glamorous or whatever. And sometimes you're like, oh, you know, but then this whole thing is the purpose. It's what's your objective. You have to tap into that purpose. And so that's the one thing that keeps me going every day. I am in bed right now, still in a rehab mode, but we're doing this work right now. This is part of that work. You know, I may not be able to walk right now, but this is what keeps me going, like working with you, Evan, working with our other comrades who do this podcast. And we do work outside of this podcast, but again, understanding there's a larger purpose. This podcast serves a larger purpose. The work we do serves a larger purpose. Understanding what Lorraine Hansberry did, the work she did, the work Ho Chi Minh did, the work El Haj Malik El Shabazz did, like all of these people that we claim every day on average that, oh, they inspire us, but how many of us continue to take on that work? We're not going to be here forever. So we have to do this work so then other people can take on this work, and it continues until our objective is met. And even when the objective is met, we still have to continue that work, because what happens,
Right,
we can reach
exactly.
socialism and patriarchy can still happen. We can reach socialism, but ageism can still happen. We can reach socialism, but you know, there's that person out there, well, you know, like we can shift socialism to this. So if we don't continue this work and we reach our objective and still continue it, what are we doing? So I'm sitting here, you know, I'm gonna get my prosthetic and I'm gonna walk, you know, hopefully by the end of the year. But you know, that doesn't mean, you know, I'm not gonna sit here and feel sorry for myself, because I know there's work to be done. Like, it's bigger than me. It's bigger than me having half a leg. Yes, if y'all didn't hear the other episode, I did get a leg amputated. We'll do an episode about that, but it's bigger than that. I know it is. So I sat in the hospital and did these organizing meetings while my neighbor in the hospital was next to me. I don't care, because it's bigger than me. It's bigger than the hospital. It's bigger than everything. And so we have to understand that. And so we can't sit here and complain that something's wrong. What are we doing? I'm going to read this a little bit of Zionist logic. This is from Malcolm X. Malcolm X, first being in the NOI and then going to Gaza and just also organizing for international solidarity or advocating for it. He mentioned the Bandung Conference numerous times, so he understood that the struggle for the colonized masses had to be without Europeans. Like, he talked about this all the time. So he was definitely anti-Zionist, and again, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Before I did you want to say something?
Yeah, and when I was going back on the connections of me, another point is Jose Marti. I was only the figure Cuban anti-imperialism against Spain, and when the Cuban Revolution happened, like one of the inspirations was Marti, and what happened, and Fidel Castro and Malcolm, they met in my hood in Harlem.
I was born at Harlem Hospital, so so I'm gonna read a little bit of this. So this was in the Egyptian Gazette, September 17th, 1964. It says the Zionist armies that now occupy Palestine, and this was in 1964. Okay. So you had the Nakba, you had the 6-Day War, you had all of this stuff going on. So 64, then you had 67. So, okay. So he saw what was going on. This was 64. The Zionist armies that now occupy Palestine claim their ancient Jewish prophets predicted that in the last days of this world, their own God would raise them up a Messiah who would lead them to their promised land, and they would set up their own divine government in this newly gained land. This divine government would enable them to rule over all nations with a rod of iron. if the Israeli Zionists believe their present occupation of Arab Palestine is the fulfillment of predictions made by their Jewish prophets, then they also religiously believe that Israel must fulfill its divine mission to rule over all other nations with a rod of iron, which only means a different form of iron-like rule, more firmly entrenched even than that of the former European colonial powers. I'll go on. The Israeli Zionists are convinced they have successfully camouflaged a new kind of colonialism. Their colonialism appears to be more benevolent, more philanthropic, a system with which they rule simply by getting their potential victims to accept their friendly offers of economic aid and other tempting gifts that they dangle in front of the newly independent African nations, whose economies are experiencing great difficulties. During the 19th century, when the masses here in Africa were largely illiterate, it was easy for European imperialists to rule them with force and fear. But in this present era of enlightenment, the African masses are awakening, and it is impossible to hold them in check now with the antiquated methods of the 19th century. I'll stop there. But again, this is 1964. So he understood in ways that a lot of people didn't understand, in a lot of ways that were not reported on, particularly in capitalist media. And he went to Gaza and he saw the conditions of Palestinians. This is the thing. What does Kwame Ture say? Like, I'm going to paraphrase, but you can't really talk about something unless you're experienced, like something to that effect. Like you can't, like, I think he talked about being a swimmer. He's like, you can't really talk about being a swimmer unless you swim. And I mean, you can't talk about something, but you can't profess to be an expert on it. It's like watching the UFC or something. I train in jiu-jitsu. I mean, I was training prior to the pandemic and the accident and everything, but I still wasn't trained enough at UFC level to be like, this is what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And so to talk about what somebody needs to do and you're not organizing, then what are you doing? And that's what Kwame Ture was talking about. And for Malcolm X to go to Gaza and see the conditions of Palestinians, he then was able to have an analysis to talk about Gaza. That experience, that lived experience, you could talk about the conditions. And yes, we can talk theoretically about a lot of these conditions, but unless you go, it's it's not saying like you can't talk about it, because it's very clear. We're seeing on camera the conditions of Palestinian people. So of course we could talk about it. It's very clear. But 1964, you didn't see a lot of that stuff on camera. And even if we do today, it's still not like watching something on camera is not the same as seeing it live and talking to the people. So let's not get that twisted. Even more, so Kwame Ture was talking about organization. So he literally said, so this is what he said. I was trying to get the analogy right, but what he said was, you can't say anything about our organization unless you are in our organization. We will not take criticism from you unless you are organizing with us. And that is what he was talking about. So for you to say the Palestinians are doing it wrong and blah, 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 you're not having their lived experience to say what they're doing wrong or right. To be like, well, it's just like, no, they literally, it's an open air prison. I know people use that a lot, but it literally is. Like, you can't go anywhere, and they're being controlled on the borders by the IDF. How is that not an open air prison? And again, like, we can see what's happening on camera. They're literally bombing media facilities. So again, we can talk about how wrong it is because it's clear on camera, but I cannot, as a person who is not in the lived experience of the Palestinian person, say you're doing this right or wrong. That's just, I can't do that. Like, even if I'm in support of Palestinian liberation, I cannot tell them what they're doing, because I am not, like, they're fighting for their own self-determination. I can't be here and be like, I'm here to help. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not helping them by telling them how to fight for their liberation. I can only support that. And I can organize towards a solution, but I cannot tell them what to do. So again, like if I'm not a swimmer, I can't tell a swimmer how to swim. If I'm not in a particular organization, I'm not going to say, well, this is what you need to do. The people in that organization need to figure it out. And they need to have a critical process. In the A-APRP, we have the positive criticism, self-criticism process. I'm sure on some level, maybe the more communist parties of Palestine have that process. Particularly if they're following Marx, you know, they probably do have that. So solidarity, this international solidarity is absolutely crucial because the conditions that happen to marginalized and oppressed people here happen in Palestine, happen in Venezuela, happen all over the world. In Haiti, especially right now, you want to talk about tax dollars going to support a coup and a dictatorship? You're like, well, no, I know, like they don't understand what's happened. They're not a Black American. Like, get out of here. We're African. That's like y'all did that episode already. I don't.
Like you might have cousins.
You might have cousins. Exactly.
You might have cousins who they were.
And the thing is,
African. So.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't know. Like your name might be something Pierre, like, you know, but you're like, where did I get that from? You got a cousin in Haiti. So yeah, so it's so international solidarity is absolutely crucial in this process, and we have to do it together. It's important to understand the history of the connection between US imperialism and colonialism around the world, and the struggles for liberation that are happening around the world. They're like, in this case, it's not mutually exclusive, because US imperialism protects this system of oppression that's happening around the world. And like with the military stations and neo-colonialist governments that are set up around the world, it's not on purpose that people speak English around the world, either through British or US imperialism, mostly British because it's English, but you know, because of profits or whatever, people speak English as a primary language around the world. There is a reason. So having international solidarity is crucial. And for us, Africa is primary because we understand the conditions of Africa. Or like what I'm trying to say is when Africa is free, the whole world is free. What I also want to say is the conditions of the peoples in the diaspora are dependent upon the conditions of Africa. That is what I wanted to say.
Yes.
Like, blah, 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 blah. I did have a concussion, let me say. But we need to make those connections. We cannot separate ourselves from Africa at all, especially if we are African people. And we cannot separate ourselves from the struggles of Palestinian people, of Irish people. You know, again, Africa is primary to us, but we understand it's a struggle for land. So the struggle for people in the Philippines, like we have to understand these struggles are connected. Before we end, do you want to have anything to say?
Yeah, people for listening, and as we keep on saying, join an organization. You can look in the description below. We have the website for the party. If you think not for me, find another organization working for, as our comrade John, working for the justice and liberation of our people.
That's right.
Or make your own. And we got other podcasts. As we mentioned, our brother Ajamu, he has his name on Sunday evenings or Sunday afternoon, depending where you are. We have our comrades in the New Mexico chapter. They do things on Thursdays. Also,
so they do their on Thursdays, as you said. We have Revolutionary African Women. So those are our comrades Halimatu and Mzuri. And Mzuri is a beloved comrade in the A-APRP. There's actually just an interview that Mzuri did with the New Mexico chapter. Oh, it is amazing. I'm so happy to work with Mzuri. Like, she has such a wealth of knowledge. Evan, if you have not had a conversation with her, I hope you do. Like, she has such a wealth of knowledge. There's another podcast. I think it is in one of the California chapters, and it's, I think, the tech committee or something. So I don't want to get it wrong, but I know there is another podcast that is in existence. So the podcasts are growing. We're just growing because this work is important, and we want to emphasize, join this organization if you're interested in what you've heard. Look at the website, aaprp-intl.org. There is a way you can fill out if you're interested. If you are not African, there are other organizations you can join. Find those organizations. There's so many things people are doing that have a hand in community work, that have a hand in solidarity work. If we've been talking about Palestine, there's so many organizations with people who, again, are either Jewish by culture, by spiritual practice, or ethnicity. So many Palestinian solidarity networks that Jewish people have done, that people who are not Jewish have done. And so please research all of those organizations. And some of those that we've organized with, let me tell you. So, because for us, it is about international solidarity. It does not matter. Again, Africa's primary for us, but we understand that we have to work with many different people to get our objective of liberation for the masses of the people. But join an organization. We're going to say that every single week. So whether I'm on this episode, and I know I've talked, like, every time I get on these podcasts, I talk a lot. Everybody's like, no. I'm like, but watch, one day I'm gonna come on an episode, I'm gonna just be like this. I'm just be like, and y'all gonna be like, well, why you're not talking? I'm be like, why do I need to talk? Watch. I'm gonna just watch. Anyway, join an organization. We cannot say that enough. If y'all want me to shut up, join an organization. If you want me to talk more, join an organization. If you want me on these episodes, join an organization. If you don't want me on these episodes, it doesn't matter what you think. Just join an organization, because that's the most important thing. It's beyond me. It's beyond Evan. It's beyond all of us. Join an organization and assure for the objective of the liberation of the masses of the people, because that's the most important thing. All right. Oh my goodness. I told y'all. Y'all don't need me. Anyway, forward ever, backwards never.